I wasn't going to let fear and shame bury me for another 20 years. Instead, I used my tools to turn this into an opportunity for inner healing and growth. And that's what I want to share with you today, how you can use the fear of rejection, judgment, or misunderstanding as a powerful invitation to heal yourself, to build deeper self-trust, and to free up the life energy that you need to share your incredible gifts with the world. Welcome to How to Trust Yourself, the podcast for anyone who's done with the endless second guessing and ready to tune in to your inner guidance. I'm Anna Holtzman, and I get that feeling of trudging through life like you're wading through mud, trying to figure out which way to go. In my 20s, I spent more time asking what should I do with my life than writing about crushes or bad dates in my journal. I've tried on a lot of answers: architecture, publishing, editing reality TV for a decade, and finally landing on therapy and coaching, helping people like you connect with your purpose. But here's the thing I've learned through all those twists and turns. Trusting yourself is the key to moving forward, even when the path feels messy. So if you're ready to stop doubting yourself and start listening to your gut, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back, dear listeners. Before I begin this episode, I just have to say out loud that I am nervous to record this episode. I'm feeling a little scared. I've waited a long time to be ready to record this episode. And now that I'm here, I'm a little worried that I'm not going to get it right. And I'm going to record it anyway, because it's going to feel like that, whatever day it is that I sit down to do this. And I'm sharing that partly just to get it out, externalize it, verbalize it, which is already helping that nervousness calm down just a little bit. I'm feeling like I'm here with you as I'm sharing this with you. I feel like that puts us into conversation and connection. I'm thinking of you, dear listener. And I'm also sharing it with you because I'm sure that you struggle with the same thing when you sit down to do something, speak something, work on something that you care about, that means something to you. I'm sure you can relate. I'm sure you can relate to feeling scared, nervous, not wanting to do it, but also wanting to do it, worrying that you won't do it right. So we're in this together. So this episode is a little different from what I usually share. It touches on current events that may feel triggering, but at its heart, it's about something deeply universal: how to work through the shame that silences us and reclaim our voice when fear threatens to shut us down. In the terrible aftermath of the awful events of October 7th, 2023, I received an email from a non-Jewish former client. And in this email, she claimed that as an ethnic Jew, I had a moral obligation to publicly align with her political beliefs. The tone and content of her message felt like an attack on my personal identity and an attempt to weaponize my ethnicity as a test of my moral worth. And it shook me to my core. I felt instantly afraid, ashamed, and confused. And that swirl of emotions silenced me. I didn't tell anyone about the email except for my husband for months. I didn't even tell my life coach or best friend. I was so afraid that if this one person thought I wasn't a good person, maybe everyone thought the same. The email struck such a vulnerable place, dredging up layers of internalized anti Semitism that I didn't even know were lodged so deeply inside me. Looking back, I realized that because it touched on an unhealed wound carried through generations, through my grandparents' history of escaping the Holocaust, it triggered a core primal fear, the fear of not being loved or accepted because of who I am. I want to share how I worked through this experience and used it as an invitation to heal this deep layer of fear and shame. And part of what helped me recognize what was happening was the timing of it. I received this email 1 week before stepping on stage to tell a different story that I had carried shame around for over 20 years, which you can hear in its entirety on episode 42 of this podcast. That story about an experience with non-consensual touch in my teens had silenced me for so long. The shame had stifled my creativity, my clarity, and my life energy. And as I prepared to share that story on stage, I realized how the email was triggering that same fear and that same impulse to silence myself again. But this time, I knew better and I had tools. I wasn't going to let fear and shame bury me for another 20 years. Instead, I used my tools to turn this into an opportunity for inner healing and growth. And that's what I want to share with you today, how you can use the fear of rejection, judgment, or misunderstanding as a powerful invitation to heal yourself, to build deeper self-trust, and to free up the life energy that you need to share your incredible gifts with the world. So, to orient us in this story, I'm going to take us back to where it started. As I mentioned, I was preparing to speak on stage, and it was my first time speaking on a stage about anything. And I had been practicing and writing my talk, practicing it out loud. I had spent a couple of months preparing for this, and I was excited. I was nervous. I'd just gone through this whole process of working through the fear of telling this story, of saying it out loud, of performing it in front of other people. And in about a week, I was going to get on an airplane, fly to Kelowna, Canada, and share this story, speak it on stage in front of a bunch of other people, a kind, warm audience. I was partaking in a coaching program with a wonderful coach and a wonderful cohort of other women who were all there to share their story on stage. So I was preparing for this, and my emotions were heightened in the preparation for this experience. And I was just on my computer, probably doing something related to preparing for this talk, checking my emails as usual. And I saw this email come in from a client I had worked with somewhat recently, but sporadically, and had not heard from this person in a few months. So I was like, oh, this is probably an email that's going to explain why I haven't heard from this person in a few months. Opened the email, and I could instantly see that this was a very charged email. I felt the energy of it as soon as I opened it. And as I'm describing that, I can feel my muscles tighten up, kind of a bracing experience in my body, which was what I experienced in that moment. I just opened this email. It was very long, and my eyes kind of instinctively knew not to read it immediately. I just sort of like scanned it, and just like all of these very charged words popped out at me. So I could see that this was a charged email. I could tell that it was filled with a lot of different emotions from this person. And I just knew instinctively that I should not read this email right away, but I wanted to respond to it immediately. I wanted to sort of like energetically close the loop on it, I think. It's hard to remember exactly what I was feeling, but I was feeling like braced and charged and like yeah, it's I think I was maybe like feeling like this, like blanking out a little bit removed, maybe a little bit dissociated. And I somehow instinctively knew that I wanted to respond from a place of kindness, connection, and empathy. I wanted to respond to this person's emotions based on the relationship that we had had as therapist and client, which had been a very intimate, supportive relationship. So I wanted to respond immediately to the person's emotions without getting caught up in how they were projecting their emotions onto me. And so I very quickly and immediately wrote a short, boundaried, but compassionate and I think loving response, purely responding to the sense of emotion that I was getting from scanning the email. And what I gleaned also was that they were ending the work relationship. They no longer wanted to work with me. So I briefly responded, hit send, um, and then I probably experienced what it's hard to remember because I think I was dissociating, but I think I experienced what I'm experiencing now, which is just kind of like feeling shaky afterward. Um, I put the email away. I didn't read it then. I think I told my husband about it pretty immediately. And then I think I tried to like push it out of my mind because I really wanted to focus my energy and attention on the talk on stage that I was preparing for, that I had spent, the last 2 months preparing for, and it was really important to me, very meaningful to me. I really wanted to be at my best and be present for this talk. And I remember feeling so annoyed that this email arrived in my inbox a week before this talk because it really like felt derailing. I felt like it could derail me. I felt like it did to an extent derail me, but I was determined not to let it completely derail me and take my focus and energy away from the talk that I was preparing for. So I kind of sidelined it to the best of my ability. It was certainly there in part of my mind. And I remember that when I went to Kelowna, Canada, to participate in, it was a whole coaching experience, and there was a meet and greet with the other women who were also taking the coaching program, who were also going to speak on stage. And there were some bonding activities that we did. And I remember feeling, on the one hand, very present with them and really enjoying being there. And on the other hand, having this like bit of sand under my skin, kind of pulling my attention away. And I do remember mentioning, without any details at all, just mentioning briefly that I'd received a disturbing email prior to coming on the trip and that it was distracting me a little bit. But that was it. I got on that stage. I managed to harness my energy and focus back into the present moment. Did my talk, felt really, really good about it. Um, and then came home. And a few days after I came home, this was in May of 2024. Um, a few days after I came home, I think the email was just gnawing at me. And so I had decided I wasn't going to read it, but I went back on that decision. I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I went back and read it word for word. And the the actual words that were written there were so much more cutting, felt so much more personal and weaponized, really. They felt like weapons directed at my ethnicity, a part of my identity that I honestly did not really give much thought to prior to um, this period of time when suddenly it felt like to me, after years of being really able to just be a person who happened to be Jewish, uh, suddenly I found myself in this highly politically charged time when it was no longer so simple. And this was a part of my identity that felt very, uh, I don't know how to describe it, politicized, fraught, scrutinized, picked apart. Um, and in in this email, really just it's hard to find the words to capture what that felt like. It just felt like somebody had reached their hand inside of my body and like grabbed one of my organs and claimed it for their own. That's just how I experienced it. It was really unnerving, especially coming from someone who I had up until that point had a close relationship, albeit a professional relationship with. So that kicked off a period of time in which I just was obsessed with this email. I read it over and over again. Um, and I vacillated back and forth between so many different feelings. Certainly, I felt anger and rage. I did feel some regret at having responded to this person before reading the email and having responded in kindness. Although after after much time has passed, I'm glad I responded that way. But in the moment, I felt rage, anger, resentment. I also felt tremendous fear, and I'm just going to call it paranoia. Like the fear just kind of globalized and catastrophized. And because I had not expected this, uh, I had not expected this from a person who I thought I knew. I I didn't this is why I didn't tell anyone else except for my husband, because I thought, well, how do I know that there aren't other people that I think I know really well who feel this way about me, who have these thoughts about me? Um, and it just really triggered me to want to get very small and quiet and hide. Um, I also felt like maybe I was going crazy. one of the things that I became obsessed with was maybe I had misinterpreted this email. How could this person who I thought I knew, who I liked, who I thought it was kind, um, and I'm not saying that they're not any of these things, but this email was not kind. And I just could not reconcile that. And I questioned myself. I doubted myself. I went around in so many circles. I tried to find someone else who could read the email and give me a second opinion, but I couldn't somehow find the right person. Um, my husband wasn't willing to read it with good intentions. He just didn't want to dignify it. But I was just sort of desperate for some kind of validation or uh, just check-in point. And yeah, I just got really, really lost in rumination. And I vacillated back and forth between feeling like the person who sent it was an awful person and really just hating her, and then feeling like, well, I must be an awful person and I must be hateable if I received an email like this. Um, and it just kind of went around in circles for a long time. It took me a few months before I guess my nerves settled just with time, just enough for me to be able to finally share this with then my life coach who was on this podcast recently. Um, I was able to share it with her. I was able to share it with a very few close friends that I felt safe with. And I was able to receive that reality check, that compassion, that reflection, and that reassurance that, I'm not crazy, but also that I'm not alone in this world, that the people who I love and who I feel loved by are there, and have not suddenly changed who they are or how they feel about me. But it was a process getting there. And getting there was certainly not the end of the story. There was a lot more unraveling to do, and there still is. But there came a turning point when my process started to change directions from what I call a downward cycle of just fear feeding into fear. I felt that this email was an expression really of this person's fear that they projected onto me, turned onto me. And then my fear responded to their fear. And then I would have these conversations in my head between the two of us where I was defending myself or supplicating myself and asking, for acceptance or arguing with them and trying to prove my point. And it just felt like fear feeding fear, like a ping pong match of fear, where my fear, their fear, the fear around us in the world just was all amplifying each other. And it felt like this downward spiral into stuckness and just negativity. And there came a point when that spiral started to turn around for me and started to move in the other direction toward love, out of fear and toward love. And that turning point, I think it was gradual, but there was a particular event that I remember as being the turning point. So I was out in the Rockaways, which for those of you who aren't familiar, is a beach town that's part of New York City. And my husband and I have a home here. I'm actually here in the Rockaways while recording this. And we were out in the Rockaways, which is also the neighborhood where my mother grew up, where my grandparents lived. my grandparents on my mother's side um, are the grandparents who were Holocaust survivors. They emigrated after the war um, to Brooklyn, and then eventually moved to the Rockaways to be out by the beach. And so I was in the Rockaways, and I decided I had heard about I knew there was this yoga studio out here, and I heard that they were offering a sound bath, and it was going to be an event with a sound bath and some kind of like opportunity for reflection and turning inward. And I just thought, that's something I really would love to do right now. And I went and attended this sound bath, and it was just this opportunity to be with other people, but really dropping into your own space in an environment of deep um, calmness, stillness, this relaxing music, and an opportunity to drop inward. And as I started to go deep inward and drop in, it just suddenly, it spontaneously dawned on me that my grandparents had lived on the very same street that I was on, that yoga studio was on. They were at opposite ends of that street. My grandparents lived right by the beach, and this yoga studio was right on the bay, but on the very same street. And it just dawned on me in that moment as something really synchronous and significant. And I just started to feel the sense of my grandmother speaking to me, which is kind of interesting because I didn't actually know my grandmother. She passed away when I was very, very young, so I don't remember her. I remember my grandfather very well. I grew up being around him and I was close with him. But I would hear stories about my grandmother, and the stories that I heard about her were that she was just this loving, very enthusiastic, funny, um, vivacious, and just very effusive person. That's what I had heard about her. And she just came to me in that meditative state. And she came to me with such enthusiasm and love and just connecting with me. This was what I experienced anyway. And in that enthusiasm and love, my sense of her had this message to give me. And the message was about the rumination I had been in about that email. And her message was, I did not survive and give life to your mother, who then gave life to you, for you to be swept up in this negative rumination, swept up in somebody else's fear, for you to have your beautiful life energy drained into this sinkhole of cycling fears that go nowhere and that bring nothing good. That is not the purpose of your life. You are here to be alive and to love yourself and to revel in the life that you have, revel in love, be in the feeling of love. That was the message that I received and that I felt was coming from her, from my grandmother. And these tears just started streaming down my face. It felt like the first true deep layer of healing from that experience. And so I took that experience as a message, as an indicator of where I needed to go from there. where I needed to go from there to get out of this negative loop that was bringing me nowhere, and to change the direction of that loop into something positive, something that was moving away from fear and into love. And because journaling is always my favorite tool for healing, for connecting with myself, I took this into my journaling practice. And I would walk out to the boardwalk by the ocean every day for the next few weeks and sit by the ocean. And I would journal sometimes to the ocean, sometimes to my grandmother. And I would share whatever it was that I was feeling, if it was shame or sadness or anger or confusion, whatever it was that I was feeling, I would journal either to the ocean or to my grandmother on different days. And I would say, "Dear ocean," or "Dear grandma, I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling ashamed. I'm feeling confused. What message do you have for me?" And then I would let that voice of love answer me on the page. And it was such an incredible experience. This is something that you can try out too. If there's something that you are grappling with that feels like it's just pulling you down into this negative sinkhole of energy drain, that's pulling you away from your life force and from what you're meant to be doing in this world, you can try this. You can sit down and journal to whatever embodies that spirit of love for you. You can even journal to love itself. You can say, "Dear love, this is how I'm feeling. What message do you have for me?" And the incredible thing is that that love energy, it's inside of every single one of us. It's inside of you and it's inside of me. Just like that fear energy is inside of all of us. Just like all of us are capable of projecting our unprocessed emotions onto another person in a negative way, we're all capable of that because we all have that fear energy inside of us. And similarly, we all have that love energy inside of us, that energy that's able to answer us on the page, even though we're the ones asking the question. When you ask that question, you're really tapping into that love energy inside of you, and it will answer you with the greatest wisdom and love. And so I did that. I practiced that for weeks on end, just every day, coming to the ocean whenever I could and journaling, writing down my feelings, and asking for the response of love and of wisdom. And as I journaled and as I received those words of love and wisdom, I made some discoveries that surprised me. And one of them was that the email I received had hurt me so much and had stuck with me so much, not because of the words or the emotion or the fact that it came from someone who I thought I knew and could trust. Although those things certainly did hurt, they did. But the reason it got so stuck in me was that it had tapped into some negative beliefs about myself that I was surprised and actually mortified to discover were actually there inside of me. Some internalized anti-Semitic beliefs that, I had picked up from the environment around me, from the world. These beliefs are there. They're in the air we breathe. Um, I knew this. I knew that racist and sexist beliefs are there in the air and we've all absorbed them, and it takes some deep inner work to uncover them and rewrite these beliefs. But somehow I had suppressed the notion that, sort of suppressed and not suppressed. I can remember when I was younger making jokes about these anti-Semitic beliefs as a way of deflecting them, but also further internalizing them. Um, I can remember being asked where my family is from and feeling uncomfortable explaining that, we come from all over the place, but if you're asking about our ethnicity, we're Jewish. And even just saying it now, I'm noticing how my habit that I hadn't really thought to examine up until then had been to say it sort of almost apologetically, almost under my breath. And I was mortified to realize that, truly. I thought I was someone who felt good about my heritage, who, just I thought I was somebody who knew who I was, knew where I came from, loved my family and my ancestors, my grandparents, felt connected to my heritage, didn't necessarily think about it a whole lot, but I didn't think of myself as someone who was ashamed of who I am. And when I uncovered that in these journaling sessions, it brought up so many tears, but good tears, cleansing tears. And I actually felt grateful in a strange way. I mean, I don't wish the experience of getting an email like that on anyone. And there are certainly parts of me that still feel pulled into resentment and anger from time to time. And, and it's not a but, it's an and. I feel grateful for the opportunity to get in touch with this unhealed wound that I did not know was inside of me. This unhealed part of my relationship with who I am that really wants and needs love and healing. And I felt and feel so grateful for the opportunity to engage in that love and healing, to repair that relationship with that part of me that I didn't even realize I had been mistreating, really. So that was the biggest discovery that I made through those journaling sessions. And going along with that, another discovery that I made, or that really became so much clearer to me through this experience, is that we can bend ourselves into all kinds of pretzels to try to be pleasing to others, to try to engineer acceptance, to try to get people to like us or to understand us or to just accept us. And I think this is especially relevant for people who put themselves out there or want to put themselves out there in any way. If you are an entrepreneur and have a business, you're putting yourself out there through your business. If you are an artist, you're putting yourself out there through sharing your work with the world. If you do any kind of work that you're passionate about, you're putting your passion out there. If you want to do any of these things, you are contemplating putting yourself out there, and you probably are already putting yourself out there in some way, even if you're not giving yourself credit for it. And when we put ourselves out there, we feel vulnerable, vulnerable to rejection, vulnerable to criticism, vulnerable to being disliked. And what became so much more clear to me through this experience is that you can turn yourself into the most twisted up, contorted pretzel that you want, and somebody is still going to project their unprocessed feelings onto you because something about you that you have zero control over triggers them for whatever reason. You can't control it. It's not an if, it's a will. When you allow yourself to be seen, something about you at some point will trigger some person. And it's very likely that they will project their unprocessed feelings onto you. But it's not worth living in fear of that. Because living in fear of that is like shaping your whole life around pleasing somebody else's unprocessed fear. And what is the point of that? What is the point of that? That is such a colossal waste of the beautiful life energy that's been given to you, that you have to share with the world, all the wonderful gifts and healing and art and writing and solutions for other people's problems and love and all of the stuff that you have to share. Don't let it be sidelined by somebody else's fear and unprocessed feelings. It's a complete waste of life energy. Let yourself be seen. So I really hope that you took something from this. Whatever your identity is, whatever your life experience is, whatever your passion is, I know that there is something about this story that you will be able to relate to. I know that everyone who's listening, that in some way you can relate to this fear of being judged. And I just want to encourage you to connect into that love and wisdom inside of you to point the way forward. Don't let the fear or somebody else's fear point the way forward for you. And if you're wondering, what is one step that you could take? That's a great idea, what I just said, hopefully. That might feel like it's a great idea in theory, in concept, but how do you actually take action on that? What is one step that you can take? And here's my invitation to you. I invite you to ask yourself this question. And I encourage you to do it on paper, to journal this out, to ask yourself, what is one story or aspect of yourself that you have been hiding from the world for fear of being disliked? What is one story about you or aspect of you that you've been hiding from the world for fear of being disliked? And then ask yourself, what is one small, safe enough feeling step that you can take to start unshaming that part of you, to start loving that part of you, to start nurturing that part of you the way that it needs to be nurtured and loved? What is one small, safe enough feeling step that you can take to start nurturing that part of you? And maybe that one small enough step is just journaling it out, asking love what message it has for you. Maybe
the step is sharing that story or that part of you with one really selectively chosen friend who you know is going to be there for you in the way that you need. Whatever it is, I encourage you to take that one small, safe enough feeling step. And if you want the support of a coach as you move forward, reach out to me. I'd love to explore how you and I might work together as you take those steps that lead you toward sharing your gifts with the world. It's been such a pleasure and an honor to be here with you today. I so appreciate you listening, you engaging, and I'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to me anytime via Instagram. I'm there at Anna_Holtzman. You can find me on my website, annaholtzman.com, and you can send me an email, anna@annaholtzman.com. Sending you lots of love, and I'll see you soon next time.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please do me a favor. Hit that follow button so you don't miss a thing and leave a rating or review. It helps more people find this show, and honestly, it makes my day. And if you're looking for more ways to trust yourself and start listening to that gut instinct of yours, come hang out with me on Instagram at Anna_Holtzman. Let's keep the conversation going. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, trust yourself. You've got this.